Howdy, folks. I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's live webinar with Asterix and Thermo Fisher Scientific. My name is Kevin. I'm with Asterix here. I'm going to take you through today's presentation in the beginning and then pass it off to our speakers in just a moment. Before we do that, we'll have a couple kind of introductory slides to give you some sense of who we are, who's talking today, and what some of the content we're going to cover is. So we can go to the next slide, please. Optimizing data integration and analytics with SampleManager LIMS OData Service. So today's session is sponsored by Asterix, and it's co-presented with our friends at Thermo Fisher Scientific. Before we get into the presentation, I want to at least take a moment and explain to everybody who Asterix is and what some of the work we do in the space, why we're giving this presentation today, and then we'll get into who our speakers are. And Joe, we can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about Asterix, just a quick company snapshot, and then we'll get into it. We like to say for over 25 years, we bring a very unique breadth of highly specialized services and processes and technology that's enabled Asterix to be a leading partner in transforming the way science-based businesses succeed. So we are a services company. And a couple of quick facts about the company: established in 1995. We say we're vendor and platform agnostic, so while we work very closely with companies like Thermo Fisher, we work with a wide array of vendors in the space. We don't align with one vendor or another vendor versus another vendor. We work with our customers to try to find the right solutions for them. Locations in the US and overseas, over 2,000 employees. One of the things we're very proud of, especially in this space, is that greater than 90% of our team members hold advanced science degrees. So we are very much a science-based company that provides services to science-based companies. The type of companies that we work with are startups through Fortune 1000. These are going to be life science enterprise, chemical, CPG, government, research institutions. Any company that's got any kind of a significant R&D or laboratory effort is going to be somebody that Asterix can work with and help. And we can go to the next slide, please. So we're a services company. So what are those services that we offer? It's a very wide range. We have services that accelerate digital transformation and optimize performance across your entire ecosystem. This is going to be from the beginning stages of working with folks where we oftentimes get into things like strategic innovation or enterprise architecture. This is oftentimes helping people understand not, hey, what product should I buy, but it's more about, what is the architecture of the future of our R&D efforts. Then when we get past that, we will get into solution selection services. We will get into helping you develop RFPs and picking the right solutions. And from there, we can help with the actual development implementation of those solutions. And then finally, after that, we can help validate those systems up to FDA standards. And we can even provide ongoing application support, either on site, through staffing, or remote, or managed services. There's a wide array of ways that we deploy that. And of course, one of the things that makes us unique is we can also just do direct staffing. So we can staff your lab, we can staff your IT, and then we also have offsite managed services that we bring to bear. So a pretty wide array of services. That's a little bit about who Asterix is. Let's turn our attention to introducing our speakers. We can go to the next slide here, and then we'll get things kicked off. So we've got two gentlemen, great bios and great experience. I'm going to bring some really good insights to you today. Joao Oliveira, delivery manager here at Asterix. He's in the Laboratory Informatics Services Group and leads a team focused on SampleManager LIMS, integration manager, and implementations. It brings 10 years of hands-on experience, managing a lot of these type of projects. And joining us as well from Thermo Fisher is Francisco Marin. He's basically a background in biotechnology engineering and software development. And over the last 15 years or so, he's worked with everything from electronic notebooks to systems integrations to LIMS and general software development. So I'm thrilled, obviously, to have two great thinkers and speakers today. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to enjoy the presentation with the rest of the folks, ask lots of questions, and we'll come back on at the end and handle those as we can. So, Joao, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. Okay, everyone, so we're gonna go through a little bit about the agenda we're gonna have today. As Kevin has said, the main focus is gonna be to trying to explain a little bit on how we can optimize integration of your SampleManager data, right, and bring like those results with the analytic charts or dashboards, etc. And for that, we have a new feature on this new SampleManager version. It's called OData Service. So just a quick overview, OData Service is going to allow the application or like web publishing services to obtain the data from your SampleManager system. And it's being more flexible than any other REST-based web services. So it's going to provide a easy way to find your data, also with a data model that you can easily like pretty much build a conversation between multiple systems. All right, so on the webinar, we're gonna discuss a little bit the understanding between SOAP and REST. We're gonna introduce the OData Service, a little discussion for data governance, how we can restrict the access of your data based on user roles or groups. We're gonna have also some practical ways of using OData for the data analytics solution. Gonna have a small demonstration for the OData Service, and gonna open for some questions. Okay. So the difference about SOAP and REST, just to give an overview, like in terms of API, both sides like pretty much are refers to computer system communication over network. So usually API services are going to be offering like a server, and we're also going to be going to have an API client such as like your Google Chrome. And the server side of that API, it's pretty much an interface defined to receive requests, respond, and return response as a message. And that is typically offered by a web service. So from the wide range of web services, there are several like design models, but the most common and dominant are SOAP and REST. A little bit about the background for SOAP. SOAP provides some advantage on REST, like it's a language platform, and the transport it's independent. For REST, you're gonna require the use of HTTP. It's standardized, provides a significant per-build extensibility for the WS standards. It's built-in error handling, and there's also some I'd say bad facts for the process, which it's even though it's older than REST, but it's complex. We have a problem for message size. Sometimes we're trying to request a huge amount of data, and just the response from the server is so heavy to get return. And as I say, it's a little bit old. It's a standardized, so it's very hard for us to optimize that type of web service. In the other way, the REST is easier for the most part of, and it is more flexible. If we compare against SOAP, we're gonna see the following advantage. Like it uses the easy way of understanding like a Swagger or OpenAPI specification 3.0. The learning curves, it's pretty small. It's more efficient when we compare. Like SOAP has a restriction to only use XML, but for REST we can use different formats, CSV. And one of the most used, it's JSON. It's faster, and it's way closer to the web technologies that we have today. So if we, in a short explanation, if you'd like to compare REST API and SOAP, it's like an envelope, while REST is a postcard. So the postcard is faster and cheaper, right, to send there than an envelope, but we still could be able to wrap within something else like an envelope. You can just read the postcard too, where the envelope takes like a few extra steps, like opening, wrapping, and accessing the data that it is inside. So just to explain a little bit of the difference between each other. And for the difference between the REST OData, so OData, REST is an architecture style for exchanging information via HTTP protocol, while OData builds on top of REST to define the best practices of building a REST API. Both REST and OData adhere to web-based architecture, stateless, data format, flexibility, resource-oriented design. The difference is that OData offers like enhanced queries capabilities to standardize your metadata. So if you're building your system, you don't have to build a different design or specifications for how you can extract your data based on to which type of interface you're building. All right. And that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna move to the next slide for the introduction of OData. So let's say OData is a standardized REST-based Microsoft protocol that allow the HTTP to query your data. It's way more flexible than other REST-based services that provides a uniform way to get your data. It's supported by many applications such as Excel, Power BI. So in other words, if you want to extract your data in a easy way, for example, you may require on your lab, you may have your spreadsheet that you use it to put all your data in, and now with the LIMS, you could just set up a new query on your system to import the data and show as it was being showed before the LIMS. You know, like how in a very easy way. Like you don't have to develop a new report to do this. On the SampleManager side, you're gonna have a Windows service dedicated to communicate with those external applications. It's pretty similar to the WCF, but uses a different port to communicate. And as I said before, it also has the capability of having the data governance within SampleManager. So you can, for user access, you can define what type of data a specific user can have access to it. On the architecture side, services are going to be running in background on the server. That service is going to keep reading the OData queries definition designed by the user via WCF REST service. If the set of queries definition change, the OData service rebuilds on its internal schema, and external applications can only see the queries provided by the service. So that's the only thing they're going to be able to see it. And that's just a small design of how that architecture going to look like. You're going to have your SampleManager server with your query or data queries defined. There's going to be a communication between your data and the WCF. As I said, it also uses REST to extract the data. There is an exclusive port for the data, which by default it's the 56106. And as we have stated, REST or data use the HTTP or HTTPS. If you want to secure your communication, you can attach a certificate, and everything going to be encrypted to an external application such as like an Excel. So right now I'm gonna move over to Francisco. You're gonna lead from here. Francisco, are you there?
Yep. Hey, thanks, Joao. Please let's go to the next slide. I'm going to start with the query definitions. This is one of the most important building blocks of the OData capability in SampleManager. This is a new entity in SampleManager where the power users can actually define the data that is going to be exposed in OData. By default, we don't want to expose all your data. The idea is that the administrators can curate what gets exposed to the API. In this way, you have complete control of everything that external consumers are accessing to SampleManager. The query definition allows you to choose which data is going to be exposed, apply criteria to limit this data, and also will apply the SampleManager security, including roles and groups. One thing that is very important is actually to take into account the amount of data that you're going to send. All data is not meant to be ETL pipeline that can export your whole database. Usually it's meant to be used to export a subset of your data. So that's why we have a few tools in here to help you profile the amount of data that is going to be exported with each query. During the demo, I will show you quickly how this looks like. But the main idea of this new entity, the power user can define what gets exposed, can filter the data, and define the permissions that will be required to actually read this data. There is another useful functionality. OData also defines functions. Those are methods that can be configured and executed in the API. These methods don't relate to a particular table or view. They can be performing a task like doing a calculation, and we offer a way to do that. We will see that in the next few slides. And a few examples of things that you can do with defining a query is, for example, creating a query that will deliver result data from only the last 7 days, or will only deliver all the jobs that are pending from completion that are pending by 7 days, for example. So there are many ways in which you can architecture your data using the query definitions. And this is definitely the most important piece of the configuration. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here you can see a couple of screens. You will see familiar user interface. For how the data is chosen, we use the very familiar query designer in SampleManager. This is a tool that everyone that uses SampleManager to create, for example, safe criteria will be familiar with. It's pretty easy to pick the table that you want to use, then pick the criteria that is going to be applied, the filters, and then you can pre-visualize the data in here. And also, you can even get an estimation of the data size using the data size button to have a better understanding of how many rows will be exported in this query, and also the size of the data set. This is very useful when you're trying to estimate if it makes sense to expose a particular data set as an endpoint. Then there are other advantages. You can also choose which columns to expose. If you're going to expose your sample test results, you don't have to expose all the columns. You can reduce the columns to just the amount that is required for this particular integration. In that way, you are securing your data. Also, you are reducing the amount of data that is going to be transferred across the network and making the queries even more efficient. And another very useful tool is you can use expressions. So in this way, you can do small calculations. For example, you can calculate the amount of days between when a job was started and when a job was completed and return that as a column. Of course, you can do that in a BI tool, but it is great that you can set up this kind of calculations at the SampleManager level. So if different clients, like different BI tools, are going to be consuming the same API, this metric will be already calculated in the source. So that's actually a great feature. Can we click on the next slide, please? Yep, and this is the other functionality that I was referring to, the functions. Functions are a special definition in OData. This is going to have an endpoint. Each of these functions has a separate endpoint. It can receive arguments. In SampleManager, you will define that as a comma-separated list of values. Our documentation as well provides a good reference regarding the different data types supported for the arguments. And the great thing about these functions, you have 3 ways to define functions. You can use safe criteria. If you want to reuse a safe criteria that already exists in your system, instead of just rebuilding the criteria in the data source tab, you can just expose it as a function. In that way, if the criteria is used somewhere else, you can just reuse your configuration, because in SampleManager, the idea is to save your work and try to reuse as much as possible. So the criteria type will allow you to expose existing criteria as a function, and it will return the collection returned by the criteria, and you can just send the arguments in here. So that's pretty useful. Then you can build a function that only builds an expression. So that's also, you can use SampleManager expression language to build an expression with all the capabilities from the expression builder. So that will give you a lot of flexibility. And finally, one of my favorites is you can use a workflow. You can use a general workflow that must not commit to the database, because this is a read-only operation. But then with the workflow, you can expand your possibilities. You can do a lot of things. You can do HTTP requests to other services. You can call different components in SampleManager to return a variable that will be read by the API, the OData Service API, automatically and return to the user as JSON. So it's very flexible how you can use the functions to encapsulate queries that are more complex than just exposing a table with a few filters. Can you click on next, please? Now, data governance. We have mentioned this a couple of times. The advantage of using our OData implementation is that it will already use the security built in SampleManager. Maybe some of you have seen different products that will offer to publish a database as an OData API. There are many ways that you can do that. But then the disadvantage is that you have to take care of the security side. If you just take the SampleManager database and use one of these tools to publish a full OData API, it will publish the whole table. And if you want to reproduce the security in SampleManager, then you will end up doing a lot of work. In here, when you use our OData plugin, capability, what will happen is that roles can be assigned to the query definition. So that will be the first line of defense. If a user has a valid SampleManager users and they try to reach one of these endpoints, if they don't have the correct role assigned into this query, they will be rejected. Then the second level is the group security. Even if you have the right role, you're only going to see the data that you are allowed to based on the groups. If we are returning, for example, job information and half of these jobs belong to a group that you are not part of, then you are not going to see this job. So this is probably one of the most important parts. Take the SampleManager security with you to other applications. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind and one of the most important features for our OData API. Please click on next. Excellent. So now, when we have this, the service will be running on the server. So there is a console, a web console, where you can actually see the status of the service. You can even reboot it, and this is accessible in the default port. It is, just a way to make easier administration and just make sure being able to see the log file and see if there is anything wrong with the API. And this is also very useful when you need to do changes to the schema. So every time that you add a new query definition or that you want to apply some modifications, we need to rebuild the OData schema. OData caches all the information that is available for the external applications as a schema. We will see that during the demo. And this is the schema that is used in the external tools to explore your data. So in order to publish new changes, we need to restart the service. And this console makes that process easier. Of course, you can also use the Windows Services panel, but this console is a very user-friendly way to do it. Can you please click on next? Thanks. All right, so now how to consume the OData services. There are many ways to consume OData services. Joao already spoke about that a little bit. You can do it from Excel, you can do it from Power BI, you can do it for any application or programming language library that has support for OData. You can even just write plain code that will do an HTTP request as long as you know how OData works. And it will be possible to talk to OData and extract data as long as you have the right user and password. And for example, here in Excel, there is an option in the Get Data tab from other sources where you can get an OData feed. Basically, you can connect to an OData provider and extract information. Can you please click on next? So, and this is how it looks for the user. The first time that you connect, you will be prompted for the SampleManager credentials, the user and the password, and of course the URL. And we will do a connection from the application. This is true for Excel, for Power BI, and other tools. And the good thing is in Excel, for example, you're prompted the first time, and then Excel will remember the credentials for future requests. Can you please click on the next slide? Thanks. So then this is a very common amongst a lot of tools. After you authenticate, you will get all the available queries in the system in this OData endpoint. So here you will see all the functions that were configured in the query definitions and all the query definitions. We will also see that in our demo in a couple of seconds. Can you please click on next? And of course, all of this data, independently of where it comes from a function, from a query, from an actual criteria, all will be visualized in the tool without the user having to worry, without the consumer having to worry where the data comes from or how it's sorted out or how it's secured. So it is very transparent for the end user. Please click on next. And I believe that we should be able to jump into demonstration. Yes, so can you please make me presenter? Thanks. All right, so we're going to start by taking a look of Excel. This is one of the most common applications in every company. Everyone knows how to use Excel and how to move data around in Excel. So let's just see that example, and you can see how easy it is to pull data from Sample Manager. So in here, we just go to the data option, get data, then from other sources, from OData feed, I have a local virtual machine running in this computer, so this is why I am using an HTTP instead of HTTPS, but here you can use an HTTPS endpoint. In my case, I'm just running a local Sample Manager instance in a virtual computer, and this is the 10th time that I connect, so my credentials are already safe. Otherwise, this was the first time, I will get that prompt that I was describing before in the presentation. But in here, after we connect to the endpoint, you can see all the different query definitions available from Sample Manager. And we have a lot in this system, and also the functions. Right now, I'm just going to pick one, for example, the retest. And actually, that's retest filter by day. Let's test this one. This one is pulling all of the retests, and let's plot the data. And after a couple of seconds, Excel is just using the standard OData protocol to pull data from my local Sample Manager system, and I can see the retest as an Excel file, which is pretty great. And in here, you can just continue adding more data sources and start working with it. So it's very flexible, it's pretty easy, very straightforward. But now let's actually jump a little bit deeper into what it is happening. So let me just jump into my virtual machine and we can take a look of what it is happening in Sample Manager. Let me just share my screen. All right, so now here we have Sample Manager. In Sample Manager, under the system folders, there is a new folder called OData Queries. And in here is where you can create a new OData query definition. We have already a lot in this system. Most of them are from the data analytics solution that was mentioned at the beginning. Our solution is a Sample Manager solution focused in data analytics, and we added a new feature. We exposed some of our data sources as Power BI dashboards, and this is the source, the data source for these Power BI dashboards, all data queries. So let's take a look on a few of these ones. For example, this incidence query, you can get in here, go into the data source, is using a simple criteria, return every incident in the last 7 days, and we are returning a specific set of columns. I was also mentioning, let me just go into samples, this data size button. If I click on the data size, it is going to execute the query and it is going to provide really useful information, how many rows are going to be returned and the estimation of the size of this data set. So if I try to select everything in this query, this is the amount of data that will be sent to the network. And even I have an estimation of the amount of time that it takes to collect and generate the data, which is very useful if you're already trying to tune the performance of your queries to Sample Manager. And in here, we have just a few columns. I am not returning all the properties. And of course, I just want to quickly show one of custom function. In here, I am using an expression to just concatenate a value. I send a classic hello world in programming. Everyone that has done programming probably recognizes this. I just send a parameter and execute the expression and returns the result. So behind Sample Manager, what we just saw in Excel, this is what it is happening. This entity definition was created. It is returning right now the whole table. This is a system where we don't have a lot of data. That's why I am returning everything to show you. But this is how it was exposed to Excel. So it is pretty flexible for the power users to do this. Now, I want to quickly show you the OData console. So this is the OData console that I was mentioning, the web console. Here you can just restart the service. Even you can get to see the OData metadata. This is the custom format, the custom catalog that we were talking about that needs to be revealed. This is what Tableau, Excel, and other tools will use to understand the structure of our data, and this is how our query definitions are published there. They are published as part of the OData catalog. All right, then getting a little bit more technical, you can even forget about any tools and just do basic HTTP requests. And just using tools like Postman or even Python, JavaScript, or things like that. And this is how that will look like. You can just execute a query, get the results, and also, since this is OData, there are a lot of things that are part of the OData specification. Like you can return the count of records that are going to be part of that result. You can even apply filters like only return the top 10 and skip the first 10. So you can even create your own pagination. If you're trying to build an external application that will iterate across records in SampleManager, you can even use pagination. You can even add queries on top of the queries that were already defined in SampleManager. So for example, in this retest, I am using the OData standard to apply filters, like return only the retests that were done by Francisco and were completed after this particular date, and it is only returning 13. If I remove this filter, then it will return 383. So this is the other great part of OData. OData, it has a filtering, uh, full filtering schema, a way to filter data. So you can even use this from other tools or from your code to apply more filters on the data that is already filtered by SampleManager. So it can be very flexible for slice and dice data in analytics. Then I want just to give you a quick overview of the security part. So I have these samples query definition in here. This samples query definition has only one role assigned to it, the system administrator. So only system administrators can execute this query from OData. So if I try to use this with the system administrator, actually it will give me the expected data. I will get all the samples in the system and everything will be fine. If I try to actually use this endpoint with a valid SampleManager user, in this case I created a test user in my local VM that only has the user role. If I try to execute this, the validation the authentication will go on, but when I try to access the data, I get a 400 bad request. Web API return access denied, since the user test doesn't have the correct role to view this item. So in this way, you can be sure that we are applying security, and you will get even security errors if you don't have the right role on the API, and the dataset will be filtered by groups. So it's a lot of pretty good functionality to secure your data. And finally, this is an example of how one of these custom functions can be executed also from a low level. And yeah, you can use different languages, Go, Python, Java. There are many ways that this can be consumed, and this is the great power that comes with OData. There are many ways that you can consume the APIs. With SampleManager, you can control what data gets exposed and how, and apply security. So it is a very powerful and flexible way. All right, so Joao, I'm going to make you presenter again, so we can go back to the presentation.
Okay.
Excellent, thanks. So can we go to the next slide? All right, and as I was mentioning, we also have the data analytics solution. This is a solution that has a lot of dashboards built inside SampleManager. Also, we added this new capability where we are exposing a few pre-built Power BI dashboards, and they are all consuming the OData queries using the query definitions published through this OData service. So it is pretty flexible, pretty powerful, and this is something that you can do. You don't need our Power BI dashboards to create your own dashboards. You can just use the OData out of the box, or you can use our dashboards as a base for your own custom Power BI dashboards. So there are many ways that you can use this, but this is one of the many ways that you can use OData API in SampleManager. Can you please click on the next one? All right, so and at this point, we also want to mention a few troubleshooting scenarios that could be important for users trying to take the OData into production. If you start running your server and you are having issues connecting to the service, to the OData service, there may be a few things to check out. Like, well, the most basic one, the SampleManager server, is it running? Then is the OData query definition actually created for the resource that you're trying to access. Maybe you're trying to access an OData query definition that was developed on dev and was not published in prod. You can use, for example, the deployer functionality in SampleManager 21.1 to take one definition from one system to the other, the deployment package. Sorry, it's very easy to package definitions and then take them to the other system. And if the definitions are there and published, then is the WCF service running? That's, there may be many reasons why it is down, and if it is down, even if the OData service is running, it will not work. So the WCF has to be running. Then, of course, you have to check that the OData service is actually running on the default port or the custom port that you are using. Because if you're not using the out-of-the-box ports, if you choose a different port, then that's important to check it there. And of course, now that we're talking about ports, the firewall. So if this is a new port, let's say a new service in SampleManager, if you're migrating from a previous version of SampleManager, probably this port is not going to be is not going to be an exception in your current firewall. So you will have to ask the IT department to include it. I see this as definitely a potential source of issues, especially when you're migrating from a previous version to a new version. Then there is the other part. The query is too big, and when could happen this? Let's say that you are trying to export a lot of historical data. Maybe you have tens of thousands of results with dozens of components associated to the analysis. So you are exporting maybe a lot of megabytes of data, hundreds of megabytes even. So at that point, you may get crashes. If that's the case, always reviewing the SampleManager log file log files is a good point to start. You will see that kind of behavior there. And finally, checking that the address to the service is correct, that the address is reaching the right server, the right port, and that you have the right credentials. And we are using also basic HTTP authentication to connect to the SampleManager API. Can you please click on the next one? And this is all from my side. So thanks a lot, and I will pass the presentation back to Kevin.
Great, thank you both actually for great content and great presentation. For the folks who might have missed it in the beginning, I want to encourage you to ask as many questions as you'd like, and we have a couple on the floor already that we'll field in just a moment, but I just wanted to reiterate that, the question function on the GoToWebinar panel. I'm going to go ahead and get the recording stopped.